Okay, welcome to this Edexcel A-level video. Today we're doing Buddhism. This is unit 3.2 Mahayana, and we've introduced the origins and development of Mahayana. We've thought about some of the key ideas of emptiness, interdependence, and yata, and their development in first century BC perfection of wisdom literature through to second century polemics between at the end of the perfection of wisdom early development and Theravada. So today we move on to look at the idea of the Buddha nature that is in all of us as a Mahayana idea, and the importance of images and stupas in Mahayana. And what I'd like you to do just before we really kick off is to do some work on images and stupas. I'm going to do a second video on this, and I want you to watch it and make 4 mind maps. You're going to pause this and look at the next video, which looks first of all at the purpose of stupas in Mahayana, the psychocosmic symbolism of the Buddhist stupa, the psychocosmic symbolism. And then second, the purpose of stupas in Mahayana. We're going to look at some specific examples in Indonesia, Borobudur, and in Tibet, Tibetan stupas. And then third, we're going to move on to images and do a mind map, a poster, some notes on the Bodhisattva ideal in iconography, how it teaches about heavenly, celestial, Sambhakaya, Bodhisattvas, and the Bodhisattva Vow. And then last of all, the purpose of images in Mahayana, the Bodhisattva ideal, looking at how it teaches the metaphysics, the Trikaya doctrine, and how it illustrates the Lotus Sutra. So pause the video now and look at the second video and then come back here again. Okay, see you shortly. Okay, this is part 2, lesson 3. Mahayana Buddhism, looking today at the Bodhisattva Vow, images and statues, and what the Dalai Lama says. And this is Unit 3, Mahayana of Edexcel A-level Buddhism. So the word Bodhisattva meant something like a being who's on the way to becoming a Buddha, originally, as it were. And the origin of this is found, in fact, in the Pali Canon. The Buddha, or as their Mahayana refer to him, Bodhisattva Shakyamuni, we are told in the Jataka, the birth stories, and Mahayana have their own Jataka, bear in mind, that differs slightly to the Pali Canon Jataka. And his lives illustrate the Buddha-to-be's development of good qualities. He illustrates, his life is a dramatic tale, illustrating patience and generosity and compassion. And the Jataka stories for Mahayana function in that sort of way. In the developing perfection of wisdom literature, in particular the 8,000 verse, the early one, the first one, the Ashrika, however it's pronounced, contains a simple and a very brief definition of the term Bodhisattva. It's the earliest, it's the first example of the term Bodhisattva we know of, that could be thought of as Mahayana. It says, because he has enlightenment as his aim, a Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, is so called. Now, that's an interesting phrase. So, Bodhi, awakened, Attva, being, and then Maha, great, Attva, being. So, he's a great awakened being, a perfected being. So, he is called a better being, well, presumably than Theravada. How do you become a Bodhisattva? Well, you follow the Bodhisattva path, and it begins with the commitment, the intention. I think of the Eightfold Path, that's part of it as well. The second step of the Eightfold Path is intention. And so here is its own pathway, its own road, Mahayana. You have to have the intention. I want, I desire, I need to do this. And then you commit to it. You take the vow. And then there are the practices, the 6 or 10 stages. And if you do all that, then the promise of Buddhahood is for us all. And celestial Buddhas like the one on the right here will help us as we pray. So let's go through these. The intention. The intention, first of all, the Bodhisattva must be sincere in their search for enlightenment. Intention, sincerity, that keyword sincerity are important on the path. They give determination to reach enlightenment. You've got to have determination, effort. And one of the 6 virtues is determination, is energy, vajra. And then you take the vow. The Bodhisattva must vow verbally. It's a commitment. And you take, several vows, in fact, in some traditions. First to become a Buddha, and then second to lead all other beings to enlightenment. So you vow to be enlightened, but you vow to, first of all, lead all beings to enlightenment. So from the sutra, the Mahayana Sutra, we get the following. So Shantideva, a 7th century Tibetan commentator, very important guy, something like, much like the 5th century Buddha Aghosha for Theravada is Shantideva. He's up there with Nagarjuna. He's one of the key people in Mahayana Buddhism. And in his commentary, Bodhi, so awakens, Attva, a being, and then Karyavatra is sort of commentary. He explains that the Bodhisattva vow is taken with the following 2 famous verses from the sutra above. Just as all the previous Sugatas, the Buddhas in other words, generated the mind of enlightenment and accompanied all the stages of the Bodhisattva training, so will I too, for the sake of all beings. There's that second bit. I will do it for all beings. Generate the mind of enlightenment and accompaniment and accomplish all the stages of the Bodhisattva training. So what's this all about? The second most significant form of Buddhism, particularly in Japan after Pure Land, is something called Nichiren Buddhism. Nichiren is a sort of 13th century guy, and he's kind of hardcore, very kind of exclusivist in his views, very strong in his views. Today, groups like Soka Gakkai in Japan are Nichiren in kind of flavor. So he's a very conservative Mahayana thinker, in a way. And he said there were 6 perfections, 6 paramita. And yet other Mahayana say there are 10 steps. Well, you just have to live with that. Some say 6, some say 10. The Lotus Sutra says take a 6. This got flattened out to a nice round number 10 and some added later on. So the course of the Bodhisattva, developing the 6 or 10 perfections. I'll do another video on the 6 perfections or 10 perfections if you want to pause now. So the 6 perfections must be cultivated in order to become enlightened. Enlightenment is to become a Buddha, an exalted being who's cut off the roots of ignorance and released from cycle of samsara. Okay, Theravada would say. By practicing the first 4 perfections, one generates discipline and harmony in physical and verbal actions. According to the law of karma, positive actions are necessary as a means in order to cultivate the 5th perfection, concentration, harmony and stability of mind. The practice of the first 5 of the 6 perfections is to use skillful means. They're all forms of skillful means to accumulate merit. That's what you need to do. Without wisdom, the sixth perfection will not be developed. You won't be able to get like the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, his exalted understanding of reality, his perfected understanding, his understanding of sunyata and interconnection and all the other Mahayana ideas. And therefore enlightenment will be impossible. The fourth of the sixth perfections is about enthusiastic effort, Vajra. And again, it's indispensable. It's the first three and the last three, the last two all require effort. It's indispensable. Effort for all things is required. So the six perfections are not accidental. They're a progressive system of action. And the order is explained from going from the lower to the higher practice, or from the gross to the subtle level. It might be thought that Mahayana is easy way, but there is a progression in Mahayana that gets more difficult from the gross to the subtle level. As one makes progress in the Mahayana scheme of action, the practices grow in importance and in difficulty. The practices of each of the perfections is impossible without the cultivation of the preceding one, from which it is developed. So there's this order. The Tibetan Gampopa explains that when one practices generosity, dana, the very first of the perfections, one will accept the pure morality, sila, the second of the perfections, without focusing on material concerns. Sila, ethical discipline, gives rise to skanti, the third of the six perfections. And when one has skanti, patience, one can make enthusiastic effort, the fourth of the six perfections. When one has enthusiastic effort, concentration, the fifth will arise of the six. And when one is absorbed in concentration, one will perfectly realize the nature of all phenomena. I have wisdom, the sixth of the six perfections. So why practice these six perfections? It is not difficult to agree. It's not difficult to agree with the Buddhist teachings that say all human beings want happiness. Many Christians say that. Augustine said in his book, the Vitae, on happiness, that it is natural for a person to want happiness. We all want to be happiness. We all want to avoid suffering. Think synoptically to Aquinas. We all want to avoid suffering, to do good. According to these teachings, human beings desire happiness, but in fact they are creating the causes for suffering. That's the reality. And since the teachings explain happiness as being the result of peaceful mind, in order to become happy, it's necessary to train the mind. So the purpose of the six perfections is to train the mind. And when the mind is trained perfectly, there is a bonus. The practice of the perfections also benefits other people, not only oneself. You can't develop them in a way without helping other people. So if the goal is that of a bodhisattva to attain enlightenment for the sake of all living beings, then the practice of the perfections is indispensable. It's the way to become a bodhisattva. So in the final stage, the bodhisattva becomes enlightened. Having undertaken the path, the bodhisattva realizes the actions they have made in the service of others and the actions of the Buddha. In other words, the bodhisattva is a Buddha all along, and taking the path is just simply the way of understanding this, of discovering it. Now, 4 further stages are added, and these are typically thought as the stages that only the heavenly bodhisattvas practice. That's typically the way the 6 and the 10 relate. The first 6 are what we can do as earthly beings taking the Bodhisattva vow, and kind of the last 4 are more sort of heavenly practice.